Welcome to NxGen Podcast, where we talk with the leaders, founders who are working towards sustainability, who are working on very innovative solution. And today I am sitting down with Ms. Karina Amado, and she is the co-founder and the CEO of Abydos Bioscience. It's a great to have you here, Karina.
Thank you, Sadiq. It's great to be here. It's great talking to you.
So you have to really truly fascinating background. You spent over 15 years in finance and restructuring Argentina's sovereign debt, then achieving a massive 97% acceptance rate. How does someone transition from high level national finance to leading precision fermentation biotech startup?
Yeah, that's a question that actually a lot of people ask me because it sounds a little bit, out of the charts. Anyway, I
Mm-hmm.
feel I've lived different lives, and yeah, I've had a long career in different aspects. And actually, a biotech company for me feels like
Mm-hmm.
returning to the source because interestingly enough, before I started finance, I actually studied science. So I
Okay.
studied
Mm-hmm.
astrophysics at university. And I spent a couple of years there until I figured out that my personality is a little bit more social. So I went into economics, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
stray too much away from numbers, as you can see, in reasoning and thinking
Mm-hmm.
and abstract thinking. So for me, founding a biotech company means, you know, I'd say getting into that alternative universe. This is what my life would have looked like if I had dedicated it to science. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the edge of it, and it's very fascinating for me.
Okay. So when you made that leap into startups, you teamed up with Dr. Hector, who had been studying
Yes,
oleaginous bacteria for like 30 years.
yes.
With your strict business and a finance mindset, what specifically convinced you that his decades of lab research were finally ready to be scaled into commercial business?
Yes, well, scientists and business entrepreneurs do not usually, go along the same path. We usually,
Mm-hmm.
operate in different instances. The scientists are in the lab, and us business entrepreneurs are on the business side, working for companies, corporates, or whatever. So I did meet Hector through a colleague who introduced me to
Mm-hmm.
him. They were looking for a CEO,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, and I was looking for a project. Um, I wouldn't say that I studied thoroughly the project
Mm-hmm.
before, getting into the partnership with him.
Mm-hmm.
He explained the project. It sounded very fascinating. So actually, I didn't know it was going to be a business, thing that we could carry along together. I took a
Mm-hmm.
chance, as usually happens in the business world, and especially in the
Mm-hmm.
startup ecosystem. I
Yes.
guess if I had to say what convinced me, I say I believed in the robustness of the technology, and also I believed in the team. The team
Mm-hmm.
we formed together, us co-founders, four co-founders. So yeah, that's what I went with, my gut feeling.
Okay. And if you talk about Abydos Bioscience core innovation, so could you elaborate that part as well, some technical part?
Yes, sure. So we are a precision fermentation company. So that is the
Mm-hmm.
technology underlying our platform. We have built
Mm-hmm.
a biotech platform. And as you said, this biotech platform has 25 years in the making. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Hector's story is very interesting because him as a scientist, when he was doing his PhD studies in Germany, we are based in
Mm-hmm.
Argentina, so he had gone to Germany to do his PhD studies. He
Mm-hmm.
discovered quite literally that bacteria could accumulate lipids. So this is
Mm-hmm.
not something that he was looking for. He was working in the bioplastics area,
Mm-hmm.
and he found this strain of bacteria which accumulated large quantities of lipids. And
Mm-hmm.
he started studying that. So quite frankly, he dedicated his full scientific career, I'd say, to this microorganism, and he opened the field. Now, based
Okay.
on oleaginous bacteria, which is the type of bacteria that we use, not all bacteria can accumulate oil. There is a subpart of these that are called oleaginous bacteria, and these
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that we use. So based on this oleaginous bacteria, we use precision fermentation, which is, normal technology where you take feedstock, you grow the bacteria in fermentation tanks, similarly as you would beer or wine or any other fermentation product, and you obtain a biomass. And from that biomass, through a downstream process, which is called, you extract, in this case, the lipids. Now, the lipids could be oils or fats. In our case, we are working with fats. These are very dense type of oils. And when we started studying what came out of that biomass, we realized that it was a product that is very similar to cocoa butter. It's a cocoa butter equivalent. So it's very similar in what? In its fatty acid composition, chemical composition, if you may. And we've tested it for quality in terms of key parameters that cocoa butter has to have in order for the final end product, in this case, chocolate, for instance. It has many applications, but if you go into the food industry, chocolate is the main application, of course. So these are key parameters that make up what chocolate really is like. The mouthfeel, the texture, the snap, everything that makes chocolate chocolate. So these key parameters are the melting point. It has to melt at a particular point, and has to have a sharp curve because it goes, maybe you've seen it, or you have some experience in cooking. If you ever tried to melt chocolate, it goes from solid chocolate and very quickly to, and it burns. So it has a very sharp melting point. The same, the crystallization, because we don't want that chocolate that is covered with that white, sort of stain on top, which is called blooming. So the crystallization behavior is very important. And also the solid fat content, because if it's runny, it doesn't really melt in your mouth. It melts in your hand before you open, you eat it. So these are key parameters, and we've tested our product and it's coming out very well. Now, mind you, we're working at laboratory scale. So this means that we have to scale our technology and see if this product could in fact work on an industrial scale, on big bioreactors and so forth. But still, we are very confident that our product will come out very good. And we are actually about to start testing it with industry leaders, Indian suppliers, CPGs from Latam and Europe, to see if our to see if our cocoa butter is good enough to make chocolate.
Okay. So you are currently focusing on B2B only, or you are into B2C as well?
No, we are a B2B company, and we intend to become an ingredient supplier, you might say, or we will sell our cocoa butter equivalent to companies that in turn sell to others or make the chocolate themselves.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Now, the good thing is that we can also fine tune our lipids. So we can fine tune the fatty acid composition of any oil that we make, and also the cocoa butter equivalent that we make. So there are a lot of companies that, of course, use natural cocoa butter, which is very expensive and very volatile in terms of prices. But they also make their blends, and they use sometimes components of palm oil or shea, which are also commodities exposed to the same problems that the cacao supply chain has. So our product will try to fix that.
Okay. So, sorry. So, you like the end product is going to be the chocolate production. So, what are other application area you are like focusing?
Yes, our end product is going to be the ingredient. So it's going to be the cocoa butter equivalent. And that could be used in several applications. It could be used in food. And now, if we look at the food industry, the main application of cocoa butter, I'd say 75% of it goes into chocolate. So chocolate makers, with companies, CPGs, and so forth, those would be our customers. But it can also go into personal care products. There are a lot of creams made with cocoa butter because of its silk feel, and it's very good for the skin and so forth. So cosmetics, of course, lipstick. Women use lipstick. So lipstick is one of the products that has cocoa butter many times. So it goes into personal care definitely. But now that we're moving away from food industry a little bit to de-risk the pathway to our global commercialization, we expect to get into the nutraceutical segment, which is very interesting because right now, for example, in the United States, which will be our first market where we will seek regulatory approval, there is a big thing with nutraceuticals. And my science team is researching that we can make enhanced oils. So this means that they have certain bioactive compounds within them, and our oleaginous bacteria make them naturally. So these bioactive compounds are antioxidants, and they have very good properties, even for metabolic health. So we're looking particularly into that, especially because, as you know, the GPL1 consumption right now is in its peak. So if we can find something that can help people even before reaching those serious diseases like diabetes, metabolic health, and so forth, metabolic syndrome, if we can prevent that with a nutraceutical, with a formulation that helps them improve their metabolic health, I think that we would be on the right track.
Okay. Uh, most food tech, like currently, most food tech producing alternative fats rely on yeast or microalgae. Why did Abydos choose to bet on bacteria?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. And the reason for that, because you might say, why are these guys going on a separate path? They're, the only ones. So yeah, it mainly has to do with the fact that I was telling you that our CSO was the person who discovered this in wonderful capacity of oleaginous bacteria. So he knows the microorganism very well after studying it for 25, 30 years. So that's one of the main reasons. It's his field of study. But also because oleaginous bacteria, it has been shown, for example, there is a scientific group in Korea and the University of Korea that has shown that the productivity of bacteria, of these oleaginous bacteria, is 1.6 times more efficient at oil production than yeast or microalgae. Like, for instance, yeast have reported to have a maximum productivity of 0.2 grams per liter per hour. That's what the type of oil, the amount of oil that they make, 0.52. Now, microalgae have a similar figure. Bacteria can make up to 0.87, so that's almost double, So these are more productive microorganisms. But also the difference between bacteria and yeast is that bacteria are prokaryotic, whereas yeast are eukaryotic. What does this mean? That bacteria can digest. They are more, you might say, simpler microorganisms, so they can digest a wider range of feedstock. And that is very important for a company like us, where our costs, we're competing with nature, mind you, so our costs are very important. So we need to keep our costs low. And if we use low-cost feedstock, which has no incidence in the end product, the product is still the same great quality, but we can use, for example, agro-industrial side streams. We can make a circular economy model, but also contribute to circular economy, but also make high quality oils from something that would otherwise go to waste. So that's possible with bacteria, not always so with yeast.
Okay. And like you initially looked at creating palm oil, but ultimately pivoted to replacing cocoa butter. So what drove that like a strategic pivot, and why is cocoa butter the perfect first target for you?
Yes, exactly. So when we applied, we raised capital last year with our partners, Big Idea Ventures, who are our first investors. And when we started the acceleration program, we started thinking about palm oil. Basically, the reasoning was, okay, palm oil goes into 50% of all products, from food to personal care to it even goes into biodiesel, right? So it goes into so many things. There has to be a business opportunity here. But palm oil is very cheap in nature. Unfortunately, because it takes its toll on the environment, right? It causes deforestation, biodiversity loss, and so many other environmental concerns. But it's very cheap if you want to buy it. So the truth is, we had to, since our technology is in itself a little bit expensive in the sense that precision fermentation it's rising, but it hasn't gotten to its peak yet. So we have to compete with nature, and that's very difficult to do unless you find a high niche, a niche product with high price, which is the case of cocoa butter. And also cocoa butter came in naturally in the sense that we wanted to fix the supply chain, or at least contribute to fixing the supply chain of cacao, which is very volatile. So right now the prices have gone down again after the peak in 2024 that tripled prices. But it's very volatile, and it depends on nature, it depends on climate change and supply shortages. And there are only 2 countries in the world that produce cacao. So yeah, we're trying to, since our technology is vertically scalable, we don't depend on land use, or we don't depend on climate. So that was the reasoning behind our pivot. And we did it in under a month. So that goes to show the strength of our platform.
Okay. Cocoa butter is like currently notorious for its massive supply chain issues and extreme price volatility. So when you talk to big CPG companies, are they more desperate to solve this pricing headache, or they are like towards these sustainability issues like deforestation and child labor, etc.?
Yes, well, the EU has just approved its regulatory, the EUDR as it's called, the regulation. So this calls for a massive change in the way things are produced, because companies will have to give the geolocalization of where they sourced their commodities in order to make their products, or else their products will be banned, for example, for exporting to Europe. So that's a major issue. Of course, they're worried about sustainability, and the big companies like Nestle, Mondelez, Mars, or all of the big ones are, of course, they introduced sustainability issues into their framework. However, the thing that most worries them is the price volatility, because it takes away stability from the business. You don't know what price you will be faced with when you source your ingredients. So that's a major issue for them, and it comes up on their balance sheet. So it's very easy for us, to convince them of the benefits of our product if we say, look, we might have to sell in the beginning at a premium with respect to what you are buying, but we can guarantee you price stability, and we can guarantee that you will have the amount that you need. So at scale, of course. So for them, it's very easy, to do the math and realize that something that takes away their economic margins, such as natural cocoa butter, when compared to our product, our product becomes competitive because it has other features that allows them to eliminate these risks.
Okay. To actually replace traditional cocoa butter for these like big brands, your product has to perform identically. So how close your fermented butter to the real thing in terms of crystallization, melting point? Yes.
Yes. Well, of course, natural cocoa butter is our standard, because it is the product that makes chocolate what really is. But if we are very strict about it, we are actually not competing with cocoa butter per se. Our competing products are cocoa butter equivalents, which have been on the market for several years. And as I said, these cocoa butter equivalents are blends that company make, and some of them have compounds sourcing from palm oil to shea butter and others, high oleic oils, for example, and so forth. Of course, they have to fine tune these blends, or else the chocolate comes out not in the way that it has to in terms of sensory feel for the consumer. And that's something that's very important for these companies. But also there is a standard of identity in chocolate. And in Europe, for instance, it's very strict. You cannot use more than 5% of other compounds in order for your product to become chocolate, named chocolate on the label. So some of these companies, for example, Plavis and others, are stepping away. Some of their products are stepping away from being called chocolate, and they're called, something else like chocolatey, chocolate flavor, you name it, but not chocolate product. So the final decision is either you step away from the standard of identity and use more components that can allow for your costs to be reasonable in order to sell your product, or you use natural cocoa butter in the amount that is required by law, by the standard of identity, and your product is so expensive that sometimes many buyers cannot attain it. So it's a choice for the companies, right? Now, our competitors are the cocoa butter equivalents. And with respect to cocoa butter equivalents, we are confident that our product is high quality. It performs almost identical to cocoa butter, and it creates the same sensory experience for the consumer.
Okay.
I cannot get into specifics in terms of the numbers because this is part of our trade secret. We are in the process of obtaining our IP, but we have 4 POCs, proof of concepts underway with major industry leader companies, and this would not be the case if they thought that our product is not worth it.
Okay. And what stage are you currently in? Like, if you get funds, where would that capital go?
Yes, well, our 2 things that are top priorities for us, top of the list, are obtaining our FDA approval in the United States, and then moving on to Europe, of course, which is a more sophisticated process in Europe. So that's why we're starting with the United States to assure that we get a de-risk pathway to global commercialization. So FDA approval. We want to file our dossier for IP in the United States to get our patent, and we want to scale our technology. So those are the 3 main components that we will be investing our pre-seed round. Right now, we have our pre-seed round open, and we're raising $750,000, of which we have already obtained $125 from Big Idea Ventures. So that's gonna give us 18 more months runway, roughly, to finish validating our technology, to have our MVP settled, characterize our product, and test its applications around chocolate. And then we can start scaling our technology and start, growing and thinking bigger.
Okay. So you completed this big Idea Venture Accelerator program. So what was the single most valuable piece of advice, like strategic advice or market insight, you took away from that experience?
Yeah, the Big Idea Ventures Accelerator program, last year's cohort, it's a 5-month program, and it was so valuable to us. I think the main advice or our main takeaway from that program was know your customer. You have to know who you are selling to and why they want the product that you're making. You have to solve their problem. This sounds like something that entrepreneurs always, say, but really, talk the talk and walk the walk, as it says, right? You really have to have that customer's pain point in mind when you are building your MVP. So that's the main takeaway. And of course, protect your technology. Those are the 2 things. Know your customer and protect your technology.
Okay. And how do you navigate the frustrating challenges of investor demanding like commercial traction from a pre-seed company that still needs capital just to advance it at like its foundational science?
Yes, this is something that I've just recently become exposed to because I'm actually a first-time founder. So this is our first company, and this is my first time doing fundraising. And I've talked to other colleagues, and they've told me, it's crazy what investors are asking pre-seed companies to achieve in such an early stage, right? Especially for biotech companies, that it's a longer perspective. We have to look for patient capital, as it's called, because these are technologies that takes a while, to validate, to grow, to prove, mainly. So what we are doing, and it's going very well so far, is we are looking for corporate partners. So instead of asking our corporates for money, we ask them for their infrastructure. We ask them to share their infrastructure and their knowledge with us. So we do proof of concepts with them, which are, small tests where we have a goal in mind. Let's test this for this parameter, or let's test the application and industrial line for our product. So these are very small proofs, but they are considered paid pilots. So right now we have 4 of them underway, and they will allow us to characterize from finish to end our product without us ourselves paying for those tests. So that gives us a breather and allows us to make our runway last longer. And in the meantime, of course, we talk to investors, we're fundraising, but it's totally different when you are telling investors a story something that you imagine about your product, because of course every entrepreneur believes in what they're building. But it's so different when you tell them, listen, I have this partner I tested for this and it came out well. So our product is good. So if you can prove that your product is of quality, that you have interest in the market and your technology is validated, fundraising is a little bit easier.
Yes, that's true.
And that has been my experience so far.
Okay. Finally, looking at the path to market, what are your immediate priorities regarding regulatory approvals? Like, since using bacteria for food fats is highly novel compared to the traditional yeast route, so how are you preparing for FDA or GRAS approval and securing your first patent?
Yes. Well, as I said, those are our 2 main priorities. And in terms of regulatory pathway, of course, we know that bacteria are not as well known as yeast for the production of lipids. So there will be perhaps more hurdles there, but we are confident that we can make it. We have a good food lawyer, but aside from that, we can prove that our strain is non-toxic. So, and we are using non-GMO strains. So we have the tools, of course, for genetic engineering, but we are using wild strains, and these are non-toxic. So we are confident that we can build up a case that will convince the FDA. So we will do that. Once we close our fundraising round, we will have the capital necessary to go down that road. And in terms of IP, well, we are preparing also to present our patent in the United States, and it will cover our upstream operations and the optimization of the strains before getting into the bioreactor, and afterwards our downstream process, which is, of course, very unique, and that's what we will cover with our patents.
Okay, that's great, Karina. It was great knowing about your innovation about Abydos Bioscience, and I will share this with my connection on LinkedIn, on YouTube as well, and I'll let you know. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Sadiq. It was great. I spent a great time with you, and thank you so much for considering our company.
Okay.